Parshas Vayechi 57:81, one of the most heartbreaking elements of this terrible pandemic that we are living through. So many people dying, but what makes it even more painful to so many is that too many people have been unable to say a proper goodbye to their loved ones because of the highly contagious aspect of this terrible disease. Many COVID patients have been physically isolated from family, even in their final moments. And I remember I had a conversation with one very well-known rabbi, and this rabbi told me he was sitting Shiva for his sister who had died from COVID, and he expressed gratitude that at least at the moment of the Yitzias HaNeshama, at the moment where the soul departed from the body and went to heaven, at least his sister's son had been able to be there at the moment of the Yitzias HaNeshama. So even in his tremendous grief, he was so appreciative of that opportunity, which has been denied to so many people during these past few months. The instant of Yitzias HaNeshama, when the Neshama leaves the body, is a moment of tremendous holiness, as it's a great merit to be able to be there and to accompany the Neshama as it crosses over the Yabok River, as we call it. The days and the hours leading up to the departure of the Neshama are also moments of extreme holiness. Rashi tells us in our portion that Hashem rests. It says, "Vayischazek Yisrael, Vayechi v'amitah." Israel, Jacob strengthened himself and picked himself up on the bed. And Rashi tells us because Hashem rests on the bed of a sick person. And thus Hashem is always present near the sick. And furthermore, the Talmud tells us that until Yaakov, nobody was ever sick. No one was ever sick before they died. But Yaakov prayed to Hashem that he could become sick before death so that he would have the ability to share final words with his children. That's what the Gemara tells us in Bava Metzia 87a. And then Gemara in Gittin 15a tells us that the final words of a dying person are to be taken so seriously that they have the status of law in some cases, that they're incredibly sacred, and we attribute to them special legal status. So it's a special merit to be able to bless one's students before, it's a special merit to bless one's children and descendants before they die. As it states in the Midrash, in the Tanchuma, it states, the righteous, the tzaddikim, bless their children as death comes near. For Yitzchak said to Esav, I will bless you, lifnei Hashem, because lifnei amut, before I die. And so from the fact that Yitzchak said to Esav, I'm going to bless you in front of Hashem before I die, we learn from this that it's a special bracha for a parent to bless their children before their moment of death. The spiritual power of being present with a dying person appears in both our Torah and in our Haftorah. In our Torah portion, as Yaakov's moment of death comes near, he gathers his sons together and he blesses them. And immediately afterwards, the verse says that when Yaakov finished, when Yaakov finished his instructions to his children, Vayigva, he drew his feet together into the bed, and breathing his last, Vayei Asaf el Amav. He was gathered until his people. And so too in our Haftorah, when David HaMelech, when his life is coming to a close, he calls to his son Shlomo, and says, when David's life was coming to a close, and he instructed his son Shlomo accordingly. So that's from our Haftorah, from the first book of Kings, chapter 2. According to our sages, there is a gap between what Yaakov had intended to say to his children in his final moments and between what he actually ended up saying to them. Says the pasuk that Yaakov calls to his children, and he says, I'm going to tell you what will happen ba'achrita yamim, in the end of days. But according to the Talmud, Yaakov had intended to reveal, the Gemara tells us in Pesachim 56a, Yaakov had intended to reveal them the Ketz Yamin, the time of the messianic redemption, the time when all the tsaros, when all the pain and the tribulations and the trials would finally go away. Yaakov intended to reveal to them the Ketz Yamim, but he was unable to do so. The Shekhinah departed from him at that moment. At that moment, Hashem abandoned Yaakov, and Yaakov couldn't see the time when the Mashiach was going to come. So Yaakov thought to himself, Chas v'shalom, he says, God forbid, maybe one of my children has a psul, has a defect, maybe they're worshiping idolatry, and for this reason, I'm unable to tell them when the Mashiach is going to end. That's why when the Mashiach is going to come, that's why the Ruach HaKodesh has departed from me. And when his children heard this, the children said to him, Yisrael, his father, Jacob's name was Yisrael. They said, Shema Yisrael. They addressed him by his honorific, by his title. Yisrael is a title. He said, listen, Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hashem is our God. Hashem is one. And when Yaakov heard this, when he heard that his children were completely dedicated to the service of Hashem, he said, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusol Olam Ved. Blessed be his glorious name and his kingdom forever and ever. Because all of his children were indeed righteous. That's why Yaakov said this bracha. So since Yaakov's children were indeed not sinners, then we have the question, why at the end of his life did Yaakov, when Yaakov wanted to reveal the Ketz Yamin, why did the Ruach HaKodesh depart from him? Why was he unable to tell them this moment? Why did he lose that ability? So the Talmud doesn't give us the answer to this question. So there are a number of suggestions from later commentaries. One suggestion is from the Per Yaakov, and it says that he wasn't able to tell his children when the Ketz Yamin would be there, when the Mashiach would arrive, because if the children would have realized how long it would take and how hard it would be, they never would have had the strength to go through with it. And so therefore it was intentionally hidden from them. A second answer I saw in the Tiferes Shlomo. The Tiferes Shlomo says, Yaakov wanted to tell them, but you could only have Ruach HaKodesh from a moment of pure joy, of happiness. You could only connect completely with Hashem in moments of tremendous joy. And so therefore, at that moment, when he saw the trials and tribulations that the Jewish people were going to go through, he had such tremendous sadness. And it's for this reason that he wasn't able to have the Ruach HaKodesh at that moment, because his initial glimpse brought him to such sadness. Another possibility, and I'll admit that this is the one that most resonates with me, is that Hashem removed Yaakov's ability to tell them about the redemption, about when the Mashiach was going to be here, because knowing the moment of redemption, knowing exactly when that moment is going to be here, is from a spiritual perspective a piece of information that is a dangerous distraction. Our lives are supposed to be lives served in service of Hashem at all times in an effort to bring about the redemption. So knowing the moment of redemption could divert us from our holy efforts to bring about the redemption. Our job is not to sit around passively and wait for the moment, so to speak, when we get out of jail. That's not what the redemption is about. Our responsibility is to work every day to bring about the redemption, to fix the world, to make the world better. So knowing the moment of the redemption is a spiritual distraction which might prevent us from working hard to bring the redemption. Our responsibility is to work every day in order to bring about a better world, and not simply to sit around and wait for this utopian world to arrive. But since Yaakov was unable to tell his sons when the redemption would arrive, he shifted his message. He could no longer reveal the Ketz Yamin, so instead he gave each of his children a bracha. He gave them each a blessing. As the pasuk states, Yaakov blessed them, each kavir chato sher beirachotam, that Yaakov gave them each an appropriate blessing. But the blessing that Yaakov gave them hardly seems like blessings. They hardly seem to be blessings, and they hardly seem appropriate for the deathbed. What does he say to Reuven? I mean, all of the brachos don't seem especially great, but the first three stand out. To Reuven, he says, Pachas kamayim al tosar, you're unstable like water. You're not gonna be able to maintain. Ki alisa mishkavei avicha, you melted your father's bread. You brought disgrace upon the family. And about Shimon and Levi, he says, Bikalam bisodam al tavo nafshi. But he says, I don't want to be in your council. I don't want to be there. Bikalam al techad kvodi. He says, I don't want to be counted amongst your gatherings. Ki ba'apam arguish. That these are people who killed a man, and they slayed a man. Rashi says this refers to them killing Shechem and being responsible for the sale of Joseph. Why is this the bracha? How is this a bracha, a blessing that Yaakov Avinu gives to his sons on his deathbed? Is that the moment to really settle scores? Chas v'shalom, so says Rav Shlomo Volbe in his classic work, Alei Shur, he explained that Yaakov's words to his sons are truly the greatest blessings in the world, because the blessing of Yaakov to his children lay in the fact that he revealed their core characteristics. To Reuven he revealed that his greatest weakness was that he wasn't stable. And so for this reason, Yaakov says, you're not stable. And so that's why it's not appropriate for you to be the king or the priest. People need stability in those positions. Someone who is not stable as a leader can make terrible mistakes. And so too for Shimon and Levi, Yaakov said, Afitzem b'Yisrael, I need to scatter you. He says, your big problem is when you're together. But if you go independently, if you separate from each other, that you would be able to succeed, you'll be able to reach your potential. So the greatest blessing that Yaakov gave to Shimon and Levi was in telling them their weaknesses and the qualities they needed to improve. That's a tremendous blessing, for if somebody recognizes their own defects, it's possible to save oneself from making major errors. Levi must have heeded Yaakov's advice, because Levi was given this harsh blessing. But who comes from Levi? The greatest human being ever, Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen, they come from the tribe of Levi. It must be that Levi took to heart Yaakov's message, the blessing, and he worked on what Yaakov said. He said, me and Shimon, we're not good together. And so they separated, and then he was able to reach his potential for his descendants. And that's how Moshe and Aaron were able to come from the tribe of Levi. In other words, what Rav Volpe is telling us is that the greatest blessing is to be able to tell a friend or a relative the truth about something very important, so that their friend or their relative can improve and become great. This is why these blessings take place at the deathbed of Yaakov. Once he realized that he couldn't reveal the Ketz HaYamin, he turned to teaching his children how they could work on themselves to bring about a better world, speaking to them with clarity and with honesty of a person with absolutely nothing to lose. A person on his deathbed, Yaakov was telling them how they could improve. The Gemara doesn't say the children of Israel, the children of Yaakov said, we didn't sin. But the Gemara is not saying that Yaakov accepted that. Yaakov was saying to them, look, maybe you're not worshiping idolatry, but there's a lot you could improve, and that's why I don't have the Ruach HaKodesh now. That's why we don't have the Geula now. We need to work on these characteristics in order to improve. In the time of the prophets, says Rav Volbe, quoting the Vilna Gaon, somebody could travel to a Navi, and the Navi would tell us what to improve on. Today we no longer have the Nevi'im. So where do we go? We go to our holy works. We go to the Mesilas Yesharim. We go to the Gemara. We go to our holy works, and the holy works tell us And our holy writings, they tell us how we're able to improve ourselves and grow in our essential qualities. So the truest blessing of all is to tell someone the truth so that the person can improve, so that we all can improve. And who else can tell the truth and speak with such clarity except a person who is in their last moments? This is the message of the Haftorah when David HaMelech calls his son Shlomo and he says, "Hechazakta liYosish." He says, I'm going the way of Derech HaEretz. I'm going, these are my last moments. Your job now is to show yourself that you are a man. And King David goes on, he tells Shlomo some very unpleasant things. He tells him he has to get rid of Yoav. He has to get rid of Shimi ben Gera. And he tells him that he needs to act decisively and firmly at its core. This is in line with the type of message that Yaakov Avinu gave to his own children. They're both in essence saying, I'm going to tell you things that are not pleasant, but these are the things that are necessary to your future growth and success. The greatest blessing in life is to have self-awareness of our own strengths and weaknesses and to have a desire to improve and to embrace further awareness of our own strengths and weaknesses. In the end, this is why Yaakov chose Yehuda as the future leader instead of Yosef. Yosef was perfect, so to speak. He was Yosef HaTzadik. What did he need to work on? There's no concept of Yosef doing tshuva in the Torah. Yosef was the perfect son. He never had these mistakes. But Yehuda, he didn't come from he wasn't the favored child, not from the favored wife. He made some fundamental errors. He said he was participating in Yosef's sale. Ma betza, what do we gain? Naroges achina, what do we gain out of killing Yosef? We'll throw him in the pit. Yehuda sinned with Tamar, with his own daughter-in-law. So he made some dramatic errors. But what Yehuda did have is self-awareness and a desire to improve. That was why Yehuda was selected to be the Melech, the king who doesn't have this desire to improve. What a tragedy! What a tragedy for his kingdom. And I saw, this is the year of Avelos for Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb. I saw that Rabbi Norman Lamb wrote a Devar Torah in 1960 comparing Yosef and Yehuda. And in this Dvar Torah, he writes that Yehuda starts off as the imperfect person compared to Yosef, who's the prototypical perfect person. But today, we are no longer in the tribe of Yosef. All of us Jews today, all that remains, aside from the Kohanim and the Leviim, all of us come from the tribe of Yehuda. And what Yehuda teaches us, and what every true leader must understand, appreciate, and have experienced himself, is that willful purpose of improvement of character is possible. That it is not impossible to transform one's initial personality and change it for the better. It is not only not impossible, it is absolutely mandatory. So may we all be blessed to hear blessings from our loved ones in the same way that Yaakov blessed his own children with truth and with a desire to improve. And may we all be blessed to improve ourselves in the same way in which Levi and his descendants improve themselves. And if we do that, then, like Levi, we too may merit descendants that walk in the path of Moshe and Aaron.